Hello, legends. Boy, have I got a guest for you. Miles Harris. Miles is a absolutely wonderful gentleman. He knows everything there is to know about all those topics which we have an interest in and that we'd like to know more, like the identity that everyone's worried about at the moment, the Chinese social credit system, the financial manipulation crashes, CBDCs, etc., etc. And I think I've said enough. Let's get into it. Miles, how you doing, sir?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. I remember I was doing a live stream the other day, wasn't I? I was talking about some of the topics we cover on this channel, like the digital identity, anything to do with the downfall of Keir Starmer is always popular. As you know, Mars, I always try to pitch it a bit higher to understand who controls the Keir Starmers of the world. And you left a very valid comment, the likes of which I won't pretend I've got the brain cells to remember. And I thought, you need to come on the show. So, before we get into your story, just to sort of start rip roaring so people can get a grip of what we're going to be talking about. The other day, Company's House sent me an email. It said, could I? It was something to do with they wanted this new login thing. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. And I needed to provide some ID. Now, immediately, I thought of Gary Waterman, the former police officer who, as everyone knows, Gary lives in his van. He's a renegade outlaw. Um, he's not opposed to taking down some of these 5G towers and stuff and publicly owning it because, in his view, they're illegal, etc., etc. And I'm not here to kind of talk about Gary, which I know a lot of people like to do. What I'm here to say is he highlighted how Companies House, how these companies that are registered on there or incorporated or limited, whatever the right expression is, a lot of them are falsified, that the owners can be several different people or they can change. Da, 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 da. And so suddenly, Miles, I saw this need for um, a let me just think of the word, to acknowledge who are these people through them having to provide identification. That's what I'm. And I thought, wow, maybe Gary's really hit something here, and they've had to pay attention, which is how it come across. Point I'm getting at is, hang on a sec. Did they just get us into the digital ID thing by the back door?
Um, I think it's worth just breaking it down slightly there and just understanding exactly what is distinct about this digital ID and what's so powerful about it, really. And that is that if you think about current systems, that they're actually siloed. So, for instance, you've got your passport, you've got your driving license. And they're all in different departmental silos, in essence. Now, the key difference with digital ID is that they effectively want to bring all of those different silos together into one interoperable database, which records your identity. Now, to do that, they've got to have a verified ID system. So that will mean that you've got to have a government document scan so that you actually submit that. And in addition, they will then also authenticate that against your against facial recognition software via a selfie or a photo. And the primary way in which they're doing this at the moment is via the government's One Login site. Now, there's an article which came out recently, which I've covered on my channel there, which suggests that 11 million people have already signed up to this. Now, as we know, the government doesn't often tell the truth. So, how believable that figure is, we don't know, but it's certainly a decent number of people. And the number of emails and the number of comments that I've received for people that now actually realize that they have signed up to digital ID unknowingly is, yeah, is obviously troublesome. And, you know, it's really a complete abuse of trust in essence, because you don't necessarily realize that you're signing up for digital ID. And that's the key point that I've really wanted to actually stress on my channel, that actually it's not about this brick card or a downloadable element there, or a downloadable app, for instance. It is actually having a unique identifier. So if you've got that unique identifier, which is then available to be shared across government services and later private services as well, then that's what they want. And they want everyone signed up to this sort of one login system ultimately. So that's what they're really targeting. And that is ultimately the real anchor point for all identity across government. And that, as I said, turns those separate databases into one networked identity system. And you're granting consent ultimately by signing up and verifying on one ID, even if there is, you know, a fair bit of coercion that's obviously taking place in encouraging you to sign up to it.
There's a lot to unpack in just this alone, and we will, friends at home, we will come on to Miles' story. Can I just ask everyone, please like and subscribe to the channel. We're not the channel that does monkey riding on a pig. We get a little bit deeper in life than that, because we love our children and we want a better future for them than the crock of shit that we've got now. So I can't help you, and nor can Miles, if you don't like and subscribe. Many of you will have been unsubscribed. I don't know why the platform does that, but it does, so you won't be getting any notifications. So if you can just check, friends, that you're liked and subscribed, I really, really would appreciate it. Miles, a lot to unpick there in no particular order. So the first thing is, what do we say to people who quite rightly point out that, well, hang on a sec, having all your information centralized rather than spread across different databases cuts an awful lot of work down for government bureaucracy, services, officials, as it does for you, having the one, you know, having this one database?
Well, I think what you've then ultimately got to consider is that this creates a single point of control. And that is ultimately the perfect infrastructure for mass data sharing. So your data will be sold and shared, surveillance, and potentially social credit scoring as well. And so eventually in time, what that could mean is the actual need to actually forego bodily autonomy to avert the prospect of someone hitting that kill switch on your identifier. And in addition to that, when you consider programmable currency, which is now under pilot in the UK, it potentially means that you can also lose the ability to transact. So I think there's two key elements there. If you want to maintain bodily autonomy, and if you want to maintain and ensure that you always have the ability to transact, yeah, you don't really want to go for digital ID.
So let's just take a scenario. Let's just say I take my newborn child to I don't know, a healthcare system, and they make it undergo a certain procedure, and my child then gets damaged for life, or heaven forbid drops down dead. Off the back of that, I go and do some research into the history of these kind of procedures and come to the conclusion, as a, you know, an educated 56-year-old adult, that hang on, there's no validity in this. In fact, there's only harm with no benefit whatsoever. And therefore, when the government and through their mainstream media start shouting that I've got to go and have a procedure down at the doctor's, and I'm like, fuck that. Are you saying that my credit score could be affected if I don't comply?
Well, of course, they're not openly stating any of this, and it tends to come through other bodies in which you can see the direction that we're heading towards ultimately. And what they have built, therefore, is they've built the perfect infrastructure to actually enable that. Yes. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about there. Yeah. And recently, the Carbon Trust came out with a paper which was identifying how they want to allocate carbon rations, in essence, to individuals, and that's obviously another concern, because when you're talking about programmable money, you're talking about the ability to actually determine every transaction that is made, and when every product then has a carbon allowance attached to it, then you can see that, yeah, it's getting a little bit dystopian, to say the least, really.
Right, I've got you. I've got you. Um, Going back to the company's house registration, and for our friends out there, let's not forget that this affects an awful lot of people. I've got two companies, or I'm a director in two companies myself, just to do what I do, Miles. And at first, I always kind of look at this as a third party. I'm like, oh, they're making those poor guys do that bit, and I'm hanging a sec. I'm actually, what this is affecting me. My
Mm.
best mate messaged me the other day straight away after I did a live stream and said, Chris, this is, companies house are forcing people to do. And it was only then that I kind of was like, so there's more to this than just some new fancy, login, and a bit more kind of security on who's starting a company these days. So that said, how can they make this law legal that you have to?
Well, that's a very good question, because if you consider the Identity Documents Act of 2010, that actually prevents a national register. And that really did act to actually put the nail in the coffin of the campaign towards ID cards at that time. Now, that act would need to be repealed or amended. So I think really what they're hoping to actually generate there is a critical mass of people that have actually signed up to the one login system. And then once they've actually got everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people, that critical mass signed up to the one login system, then they can then look towards repealing that act, because the public have almost consented and actually agreed to it. But in addition to that, what they're also doing is building this via a federated mechanism. Now, I break that down in various videos on my channel there. But the federated mechanism ultimately uses a public-private partnership to actually store the verified identities. So they're not necessarily held by the government themselves. And so they're being very, very crafty in the way in which they're working around that legal aspect as well.
Yeah, I read something, saw something just yesterday saying the company that they've got in um, actually no longer has any kind of authority. Like they had their authority cancelled.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yeah, now I did see that myself. I haven't really dived into that as I'd like to yet. Yeah, I've just been working on some other big news as well, which is absolutely enormous as well, which we can come on to in a moment, I think. But yes, of course, as soon as you've got one centralized database, then you have that one point of control, but you also have that one point of failure within the system. So yeah, that's absolutely a key concern.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you talked about critical mass there. We saw during a certain medical scenario people who were willing to place their lives on the line in order to go on holiday with their mates. And I sort of get it. I can imagine being a 19-year-old, all your mates are going to Beaver and they're going to be, you know, popping pills and giving it large on the dance floor all week. And there's you stuck in Rotherham, stuck in the shells at, you can understand why people went, oh, fuck it, just give it, I'll just do it. And the same, obviously, military. Every military person who dreamt of joining the military since being 7 years old or something finally gets that quote unquote prestigious coloured hat on their head and then gets told, hang on, if you don't take this, we'll either kick you out or we won't let you, actually go and do your job when the opportunity comes. You can understand why a lot of them weakened, can we say. So I foresee a situation where all you and your mates are queuing to get in a nightclub. They want to verify who's coming in this club, so they log into the government system. And if you're not on there, you don't get in. And even though it's only in the planning at the moment, yada yada, they still can say, no, sorry, Chris, Mr. THRALL, you ain't coming in, but all your mates, in you come and have a great time, free drink at the bar, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on people, isn't it? To say, look, I don't agree with it, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Oh, so true. And we already see enormous division within the country as it is, and everyone's broken down into these different silos, and deliberately so. That's one of the key aims of politics to do that. And you can see that this is going to fragment society, and it is intended to do so. Yeah, so it's meant to persecute those that actually don't want to go along with it, it seems.
Going back to my question, Mark, sorry, I couldn't remember if we got to the bottom of it. I couldn't see how this could be legal so quickly. What if I'd said to Companies House, what if I said to Companies House, I'm not going to do it?
Well, I think ultimately, Chris, that's really what is needed. Mass non-compliance, the unwillingness to actually go along with what they are demanding and saying, no, I want a paper alternative. I want to complete a paper alternative. And I'm happy to actually verify the details there, but I'm not actually happy to consent to a digital online system. And, that's what we need to do when it comes to any driving license applications, any passport applications, because they are trying to push people through that one login system for all of it. And it's intended that the migration takes place for everything. So if you're self-employed, the government gateway system is intended to migrate to the one login system and so on. So if we all collectively ensure that we maintain those parallel systems which don't involve actually giving away our verified identity to a one login style system, a centralized database ultimately, then that's what we need to do.
Yes. Gosh. I don't. I mean, I guess none of us know what the repercussions will be. Not that I'm saying that should scare anyone, but whether they'll just say, okay, well then you don't have a company, you can't trade. Um, pass, pass.
Yeah, it's an awful discriminatory practice that is being undertaken, and it's being undertaken by stealth. So the majority of people are not aware of what's really being demanded of them by having to sign up to this one login by the 18th of November and all the rest of it.
Yes. Miles, tell us a bit about yourself now that we've got on the crest of our initial wave.
Yeah, so I kind of followed the normal sort of academic pathway when I was at school, college, went to university. Then by about the third year of university, I really got into understanding the mechanisms of financial bubbles and financial crises, and wrote a dissertation on that in my final year, and then went on to write a thesis about the various financial crises that were taking place around the late 90s into 2000s. So that included the likes of Russia, Asia, and strangely at the same time, you also had China, which appeared to have many of the same sort of weaknesses, economic fundamental weaknesses inherent within its economy. But yeah, it was able to actually move through a period of enormous emerging market disruption without significant impact upon its economy. And so I really got into that in my master's thesis. And at the same time, I had also inherited a bit of money from my gran. And this was really when all the kind of madness had started. And at that time, while I was still at university, I took that, I think it was about £10,000 or so. I took that £10,000 and then took a self-certified mortgage out to actually buy a property. I think it was like a four-bed house it was about 58 grand, Chris. It was just crazy. Because this was back in what, 1999. And yeah, then let that property out, and I almost doubled my money within a year, basically. And so by that time, I had decided to go against a career in the city, and really pursued my own path in terms of actually investing in property. And that's not necessarily something I approve of now, but you're not necessarily taught about the ethics and so on when you're at school, college, university, of what's actually taking place. But of course, that was all about the run up and the fueling of the housing bubble prior to 2008. And so yeah, it was a very interesting time, all of that. But highly controversial that housing should ever have been turned into a investment vehicle, which of course it shouldn't have been. And yeah, then I also got into teaching economics just because I've always had like a real passion for the subject, and I was very, very fortunate that I was able to actually teach in a school which was teaching really, really academic students, and was really sort of testing their knowledge, and also introducing them to some of the principles of Austrian economics, which is more about hard money and not necessarily just creating these enormous credit bubbles. And I was just getting them to really look at the world differently because that's mad advice. Where would you ever learn that in school? That actually the best thing I could have done when I was at university is take out enormous leverage when I didn't have an income at the time and was just saying, "Oh yes, I earn this much per year," which is just madness. But that's how they fuel these financial bubbles ultimately, by enormous credit and leverage. And so, yeah, then I couldn't take any more of that because it was just getting a little too crazy. And so I was happy to step away from that. And so, I've now since unwound a lot of my portfolio there, and yeah, have just been focusing on educating people, I suppose, in terms of what's going on in the world now from an economic standpoint.
Miles, what is it that drives you? Because you clearly, I mean, I've been showing your YouTube channel here. You're doing an awful lot to help people understand, um, the basically the huge psyops that we're being placed under, and particularly the financial element of it. What is it that drives you to be a people person rather than just a ruthless moneymaker, which you obviously have the ability to be?
I think really it's about truth, and it's also I would say a love of humanity as well. That actually, my perspective on humanity is really that we're all one, but we're being deliberately divided. And I hope ultimately for humanity that we have and can actually manage ourselves towards a better future by taking action and actually, gradually removing ourselves from a system which is ultimately anti-human. As I mentioned, there is a clear example that housing should never have been used as an investment vehicle. And that obviously that's worked to generate enormous economic inequality. And while I may have been on the right side of that, there's millions that have been on the wrong side of that and continue to be so. The likes of 50-year mortgages is just morally bankrupt as a concept. Yeah, it's just wrong. So ultimately, I would say it's that, Chris. It's about truth, and it's about a belief in humanity that we should have something better.
Are you familiar, Miles, with the? I believe it's the German and Norwegian system where you don't do any of this mortgage stuff. Your parents build you a house, of which you're obviously welcome to play a part in building it. So as such, you don't start out your journey on life with this 50, like you said, 25 to 50-year debt.
Yeah, well, obviously that's huge. That's absolutely huge. And yeah, just going back to what I was saying about working in the teaching environment as well, I wasn't able to actually endorse university. There's a couple of documentaries I'd recommend which almost taught me more economics than I actually learned, certainly through my bachelor's degree. And that's quite enormous because you've got all these kids going off to university and signing up to all this enormous debt, and they're starting their careers with a substantial negative net worth, which again is just wrong. And then maybe they accumulate a bit of a deposit for a house over the next sort of 5, 10 years or whatever. And then they take on more debt. And yeah, it's just, as I said, it's debt slavery, it's anti-human. And I think we can do better. And there's ultimately millions of us that actually realize that now. And so what's really needed there is actually for us to see that as an opportunity and say, right, okay, let's actually stand up for ourselves here and let's do something better.
Yes, any society where the elders, or certainly those manipulating and controlling them, put you in debt for possibly the next 20 years for giving you an education. Could you imagine the indigenous Americans, what we used to call the Red Indians when we were a kid, saying, "Oh, right, first of all, I'm not going to teach you how to make a bow and arrow. I want, you've got to pay me, all this money, promise to pay me all this money back for the next
Oh,
20."
it's so true. Yeah, it's so true, Chris. And what I find interesting about all of that is that even when it comes to, say, the Austrian School of Economics, and that very much perceives hard money as being the kind of ultimate good, the ultimate truth, and so on. But when you actually dig into the history of these things, it gets a little muddier, a lot cloudier. So, for instance, gold and silver were not considered to be money in any Latin American tribal system, nor in any African kingdom, nor in ancient Greece prior to the Greek financial revolution of the ninth century BC. None of these other areas around the world actually considered it to be money, and I find that absolutely fascinating. So it was almost an anomaly in the Mesopotamian world, and then what subsequently happened via the advent of interest-bearing debt arriving on Greek shores in the ninth century BC was that you then had gold and silver being considered to be money. Whereas I think really money is just an abstraction of what is real wealth. And what is real wealth? Well, it's land, it's shelter, it's community, it's skills, and that is ultimately what money can help you to actually buy.
Yes, I want to come on and talk of these documentaries that you spoke of, because like you, I watched a couple that really opened my eyes up to the big sort of scam that's in play. But first, I wanted to ask: have you read The Babylonian Woe?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent book. No, I'd really recommend that to anyone. Yeah, and I think he does a very, very good job in that book. And just from a historical perspective, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes,
You've read it as well, have you?
absolutely. Uh, I've got a good friend called Mike McCarthy. We've been sort of touching base on and off over the years. His guy's former paratrooper from the Falklands. The first person, I think, to base jump off the Empire State Building, the
Right.
Eiffel Tower. Guy, absolute maniac. Incredibly uh, academic, sort of intellectual leaning, and as such, he's got an incredible grasp on what's going on the what's going on in the world. And he's recommended several books to me over the years, and one of them was The Babylonian Woe. And what I got from it, Miles, without friends, there's a link below in the description box if you want to grab yourself a copy. I'm showing it on the screen now. But the basic understanding that money used to be a simple system of exchange. We used to be done with cockle shells. And it was, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. If I can't scratch yours, look, there's a cockle shell. You can take that to anywhere in the land around us, or in fact, maybe even the next countries. And that cockle shell represents the amount of work you did for me. It doesn't represent interest, gold, gain, profit, usury, money lending, what? No, it's just if you bring me a chicken and I haven't got a goat to give you, I'll give you 4 cockle shells. That represents the value of a goat. And the merchants, who we talk about a lot on my channel, they got stuck in there because they thought, hang on, why don't we start a ledger where we start lending out the cockle shells, and when people come to pay them back, we charge them interest. So we lend out 10, they've got to bring us back 10. And then this system was incorporated into all of the structure all of the churches, the castles, the apparatus of life, and so all the leaders that are supposed to look out for us were corrupted 4,000 to 6,000 years ago by saying, look, Mr. King, your wealth doesn't lie in looking after your people. Your wealth lies in how much gold you can get in your cellar. This is exactly, you can see the system today, how it's worked so well. We've got royal families that are the richest people on the planet. We've got footballers that their whole life becomes about kicking a ball on the TV, but then behind the scenes amassing this absolute fortune. For what? Your value lies in your service to others, not how much money and of course, we all know about the gold-back standard, how that, like you just said, Miles, gold was looked at as valueless by the Incas and all these people. They just used it to make stuff because it was pretty.
They preferred cacao beans. Yeah.
Yes. So, yes, great. Brilliant. Let's talk about the documentaries. Would one of them have been The Money Masters by any chance?
I would probably put Prince of the Yen as my number one. Yeah, I think that one's almost foundational in just understanding the process of credit creation, and that really does change everything within the whole economics model because the professor that actually wrote the book on that and is involved in the documentary there. He essentially identifies that and disaggregates credit between productive and unproductive usage. And so, firstly, it considers banks as the primary source of money. So, the ability to create 97% or so of money. And that is then profound. And so, where then does that purchasing power go, that newly created credit? Well, of course, in the UK and other highly financialized economies, and increasingly you can include Germany within that. And of course, Germany is now stagnating. It's lost its industrial capacity, and that's deliberately so, really, because too much credit is flowing into the housing market and just facilitating asset bubbles ultimately. And yeah, one of my favorite passages in the book Babylonian Woe is where he states about no sooner had one empire or one kingdom actually accrued all of the gold or the silver, then they subsequently then lost it to the next rising kingdom. And really that just emphasizes that principle of the generation of credit out of nothing, so that can then fund wars, it can fund enormous asset bubbles and so on. So yeah, I'd certainly put Prince of the Yan up there as probably my number one. And then it's very worthwhile having a look at Mike Maloney's series on gold and silver. And I think also it's just important to always interrogate these elements as well, because I don't believe any source is 100% accurate. You're not going to get 100% accuracy within everything because it has deliberately been so clouded, and history has been distorted so much. And so while sources may be provided for this or that and so on, there is no 100% element there. And then I think another very worthwhile element to actually combine with something like the Babylonian Woe book would be William Cooper's Mystery Babylon series. And I don't know whether you've ever come across that, Chris.
So Bill shot by a police officer, wasn't he, in the end?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Was it just after 9/11?
I I'm not sure actually. Yeah.
Let me
I
just
can't
have a
remember off the
look.
top of my head.
Yeah, November the 5th, 2001. So
Right,
this,
okay.
just showing our friends at home, this was Bill Cooper, folks. He wrote a very famous book called Behold a Pale Horse. That
His whole
obviously,
series there, Mystery Babylon, is available on archive.org, actually.
right,
So
okay.
it's ultimately a series of podcasts, radio shows back in the day.
Brilliant. I'll have to dig them out. I'm gonna start a separate channel over on Rumble because I've got so much material now, Miles. It's
Mm,
unbelievable. The best stuff, when you really know how much we're being manipulated, is understanding the Second World War narrative. That's
mm.
been absolutely seminal. I all the stuff that I thought was, taken as gospel, I now know that all came from Hollywood, and that the true story, the massive lie that we're laboring under, of which, you know, cements the whole kind of new world order together. When you find out the truth behind it, it blows your mind. But getting back to Bill Cooper, I think obviously a guy of this stature was going to be telling the truth about what happened in New York and Washington 20 years ago. And obviously, he wouldn't be the first that met an untimely end because of his truth telling. So the the series called Mystery Babylon,
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
yeah, which kind of is a euphemism for the ancient mystery schools and the history of the cabal, the occult, going back to, going back to Babylonian times.
Yes, that's right. And of course, we very much see the sort of doctrine playing out in recent times with yeah, the various sort of psyops that have taken place, whether it's say in the United States under the Genius Act, with CBDCs being banned, but then programmable surveillance embedded private stablecoins then allowed to be created. And in addition to that, of course, more recently with Keir Starmer's announcement, which obviously gets everyone to focus on the element of digital ID as something you actually kind of say yes or no to, or you choose to download or you choose not to. But of course, that overlooks the more sort of insidious process that we mentioned regarding one login.
Let's talk about these stable coins then. In fact, perhaps we can have a chat about the whole kind of Bitcoin thing. I got a little bit involved in it, Miles, when I realized that savings account, even ISAs and stuff, you're not really making anything, certainly not what we would have made in the 80s, well, in the 90s. And so I invested a bit in the coins, in crypto it's referred to, isn't it? Cryptocurrency. And it's just one of those things where when you made some sort of gains, by the time you sold your coins and transferred them back into sterling in your bank account, all the charges and everything, it just seemed to steal all your profit. Clearly something I think you have to do if you've got an awful lot of money. And so it was interesting. It's interesting to see that you can put money in there and basically go up 700 quid in one day. And that's where I think it all starts probably getting a bit greedy. But as my friend Charlie, who came on the podcast, Charlie Chaplin, pointed out, he said, Chris, it's just a horse race. You might win this week, you're going to lose the next. It's sort of like gambling. So there's that, Miles. If you could, for those people out there that sort of know about crypto but are not really familiar with it, could you explain that? But then also let's come on to stable coins, because already you said something there, programmable. I wasn't even aware of that. In fact, I'm not even really sure what they are, although I bought one recently. By the time I put in my 50 quid or my $50, the value of the coin that I was left with was sort of $8. So somehow they stripped me of $42 in the process of getting this coin, which meant I had to go across all these platforms to actually buy. Oh, it was so complicated. I thought I was jumping on a bandwagon, and maybe I was gonna make some money off it. But anyway, over to you.
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to Bitcoin, the original notion of Bitcoin was really to serve as a form of cash, which actually held its value. There's a very good book I read fairly recently, something like Capturing Bitcoin, something like that. I can't remember the exact title there, but in essence, it was comparing what they intended Bitcoin to be against what it is now, and so it was intended to really be a form of payment. Now, this book does kind of ignore the potential sort of CIA origins of it, which I think are also sort of valid there. But what I also find interesting is this argument that was made in the book about how it was intended to be a form of digital cash, that it was intended to offer low transactions costs, that it was intended to be decentralized and anyone could download their own wallet, take ownership of their Bitcoin, and then exchange on a peer-to-peer mechanism. So almost like digital cash ultimately. But now, of course, it's almost suffering from the same downfalls or that gold has as a currency, so as a medium of exchange. And that is that no one spends a store of value. So it's often argued by Bitcoin proponents that it is a store of value. So you can hold it to protect yourself against inflation, that it will always go up and so on. And the big problem there is that nobody spends a store of value. And in addition to that, it also has those high transaction costs as well that you were alluding to a moment ago. So you're not ultimately going to use it to go to your local farmer and exchange, a fraction of a Bitcoin to actually buy some milk or something like that. And so that's ultimately the sad reality of it. And so while it's clearly being promoted very strongly and may well do very, very well as a result of that. And there is a correlation between the amount of stable coins and the price of Bitcoin. So the more stable coins that they actually produce following the Genius Act, there is the potential for longer term growth for the price of Bitcoin. But yeah, you're therefore not going to actually spend it, are you? And that's a big problem.
And the other another aspect is you've got to know what you're doing. You've got to look at it 5 times a day, or you've got to certainly keep up with a little graphy thing. How much is my money worth? Oh God, it's just dropped 300 quid overnight. Should I sell? Do I hang in there? Could it just go right back to what it was? I'm not talking about Bitcoin because that tends to hold its price, but some of the other coins, gosh, if it crashes again like it did 3 years ago, I've literally lost £3,000 in a week, etc., etc. And for people with busy lives and not, who don't have enough understanding of it, it's kind of
Yes,
it's
that's
a no
right.
goer.
And it's also interesting the argument that that it's helped to actually reduce some of the price pressure on gold as well. And I think there's merit to that argument too. So if you are going to hold it, you've got to be prepared to actually accept that volatility. And yeah, longer term, it may well do well because, as I said, I do think it is being promoted very, very heavily. But I don't think, sadly, that it's our pathway towards freedom because you've also then got to sell your Bitcoin. What are you selling your Bitcoin for? Well, the intention is that you'll be selling your Bitcoin for a gated environment that is, i.e., stable coins or CBDCs, or as they're also referring to them, tokenized sterling deposits. But ultimately, it's a sad reflection of the whole monetary environment and that we are facing what's known as financial repression, where inflation, and that is the real inflation rate, not, the kind of pretend figures that we're given, is far, far greater than the interest rate available. So ultimately, your money should be a store of value, but sadly, it's not.
Yes.
And so that encourages speculation.
I want to come back to the Mystery Babylon stuff because I'm aware that we just sort of skirted that, and I think people will find a lot of this stuff interesting, especially the kind of bloodline stuff. But the stable coins, you said something about them being what
Yeah, well,
actually are they? They just seem. Is it the same as a meme coin, or is that something completely different?
yeah, that's different. So stablecoin is really kind of developed on the principle of that it's going to offer stability. And what is the stability that it's therefore backed by? Well, it's in the case of things like Tether or USDC, it is US short-term government debt. Now, Tether is an unregulated stablecoin, so it also has other collateral allegedly backing it. And so that includes gold, that also includes, yeah, cash deposits and Bitcoin as well. So the idea is that it then holds parity to the US dollar. Now, what I find very interesting, though, about the notion of stable coins is that what you are inadvertently doing is then you are holding government debt by proxy. So you didn't necessarily want to buy government debt, but because you're then holding a stable coin, you deposit your money with that provider. They then create the coin, and with your money, they have now bought that government debt. Now, what that means is that they collect the yield, the interest on that government debt, but you now have the risk of what's known as duration risk, which is where the value of the government debt asset falls, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is the problem with all of this
Oh, it is, Chris. It really is.
especially
It's
for us
financial alchemy.
lay people, is you've lost me totally, which is not your doing. That's because we've all had our. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, isn't it?
Oh,
It's
it
this.
is. And that's deliberately so. That ultimately what's happening there is that they are passing off government debt onto the public who are not ultimately aware of what they're holding. So they may feel that they've got a dollar and they're told it's stable, but that stability depends upon the value of the government debt.
Right.
Now,
Okay. So it's kind of inextricably linked.
yes, and they've been doing this sort of thing for a long, long time. The first real stable coin that was introduced in the 17th century via the Bank of Amsterdam, which you can really consider to be the first central bank that ever existed, which I've done a video on my channel there if anyone's interested in that. And interestingly, Chris, the last couple of years, the Bank for International Settlements has written a couple of papers about the Bank of Amsterdam and its stablecoin and why ultimately it failed. And ultimately, it was designed to fail, much in the same way as these stablecoins. But you know what else happened on the same day that Keir Starmer came out with his digital ID announcement? In the City of London, the Bank of England and the UK's top six banks started a new monetary pilot. with tokenized sterling deposits. Um, go on, go on.
The Bank of England, you say?
Yes, and so this is alongside Lloyd's, HSBC, Santander, Nationwide. Yeah,
So they're trying. Is this them trying to initiate what we know as the kind of central banking digital currency that's going to come and control us all?
yes. And so that happened on the same day, or that pilot started on the same day that Keir Starmer made his announcement, 26th of September, I think it was.
What was his announcement? Sorry, that
So the pilot, oh, sorry, Keir Starmer's
the
announcement,
digital ID announcement.
yes, correct, which of course stole all the headlines.
Yes, of
And
course.
if you look up tokenized sterling deposits, I can't find any mainstream media articles on that. And I find that absolutely fascinating. And so, what is a tokenized sterling deposit? Well, in essence, if you deposit £1,000, currently the bank will update its ledger and say you've got £1,000. But when you have a tokenized sterling deposit, you put in £1,000, and the bank creates £1,000 of tokens, which are used on a separate ledger. And so all of those six banks all have the same ledger, and that is overseen by the Bank of England. And so what that would then mean is that if you're transferring money from one bank to another bank right now, it can take a bit of time. It can take hours or it can take days sometimes. But when it takes place on one ledger, then it can happen instantly. But these tokens, of course, are programmable and they will be linked to our digital IDs.
Yes.
Um,
And
and
also, sorry to interrupt, Miles, but just so I can get my head around this,
yeah, sorry.
also we're talking blockchain, aren't we? So your every movement is not just accounted for, but it's ledgered in a blockchain for life. So you, if I don't know, maybe you buy something on the dark web that's legal. I don't know. I'm just a silly example. Maybe it's legal at the moment, but next year it becomes highly frowned upon. There's implications there, isn't there?
Yes, yes, that's right. So all of your purchases within that system will be held on the blockchain permanently. Yes, and so yes, it's highly profound, really, and the key technology infrastructure there is that distributed ledger technology, and so it's not an individual ledger, so it's not the Santander ledger, it's not the Lloyds Bank ledger, it is one single ledger held between all of the banks, and overseen by the central bank itself. And this is driven via the BIS as well, the Bank for International Settlements, and their vision of the next monetary and financial system. But really, it's ultimately a CBDC by another name. And so this is already happening in the UK. And so it's really important, I think, that people are aware of that and what is taking place there.
Now, our friends out there listening, a lot of them won't be aware, if they're anything like I was sort of 20 years ago, they won't be aware that these central banks are actually private companies. So when you hear the term Bank of England, you think it's some benevolent organisation run by some old codgers, that are in there with their little glasses on, counting their coins. And whereas in actual fact, no, the Jekyll Island situation in America, was it not, where all the leading financial families, they had a secret meeting on a place called Jekyll Island, if I've got this right, and feel free to correct me, Miles. And didn't
Sounded
they do?
good.
They hid behind a headline in the news that kind of distracted everyone, and they travelled to this island under false names, and where they had a meeting where it was signed in that these private families would from now on control the wealth of initially obviously the United States. So yes, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm just looking for it here, Chris, but I can't remember the name of the clause. But essentially, it very much seems that the Bank of England is held via a reverse takeover, and yeah, so it claims to be public, but there is actually a limited company which appears to actually. Yeah, here we go. 6th of April 1974, the Bank of England established the Bank of England Nominees Limited, company registration number 1307478, a wholly owned subsidiary with private shareholders holding its £101 shares, of which 50% were sold. Yeah, widely suspected that this actually reflects a reverse takeover via these private shareholders. And in addition to that, in view of the fact that certain aspects of the Bank of England's operations are protected by its Royal Charter, Section 27(9) of the Companies Act of 1976 and the Official Secrets Act of 1989, they're therefore not subject to public and parliamentary scrutiny. Yeah, so yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Mm.
Yes, so it's the Jekyll Island folk. I just got up a quick synopsis of it there. Um, Obviously, folks, if you're using search engines like Google and AI, they have a bias programmed into them. So it's quite interesting to see what Google says on a subject, because then you know it's probably the complete the complete opposite. It's called building up your critical awareness, I think, let's call it. And so they're saying here that the motivation behind the US Federal Reserve and this secret meeting in 1910 on Jekyll Island was that the participants of this meeting were concerned about the recurring financial panics and economic disruptions that plagued the nation in the 19th century. When you now know how they operate, you can see that no, this was them suggesting that if you let the poacher become the gamekeeper, it's somehow going to be in the interest of the chickens, or the pheasants, or some other analogy.
Yes, that's so true. And they often use the argument of volatility as a need for having a backstop. And yes, so just going back briefly to those stable coins, Chris, as well. The stable coins themselves don't have a direct backstop, because if your money is in a bank account, and your money is actually receives deposit insurance. So in the UK, it's what, £85,000, and so the Bank of England can always perform its lender of last resort role as well, to bail out any banks. Now, that's not to say there wouldn't be enormous currency depreciation if they had to do so, but yeah, it's something that isn't there when it comes to the stable coins themselves.
And just a very quick one for you. Premium bonds. I've just put some money into premium, but it makes it sound like I've got loads of money. I haven't. But what I thought I would do with some of the money I've saved up for my Mount Everest summit in April, rather than just have it sat in a bank getting zero interest, I noticed that one of my family members who'd put I think they put 10 grand into premium bonds that they kind of win almost every week. And when I saw that some of the prizes can be up to £50,000, I thought, hey ho, you've only got to win the odd 50 quid here and there to get to be well up on the interest you'd get keeping it in the bank. Do we have any thoughts on premium bonds?
So obviously premium bonds are buying into government debt, and that market as well. So I suppose from a sort of ethical standpoint, you are sort of financing the government in by that sort of extension. Um, I think it just varies, Chris. It'd be interesting to see what your friend there has actually kind of made in percentage terms.
Mm.
But some people can win. But of course, the system is designed so that the actual profit lies with them rather than with the average investor. So
Damn.
it's that rigged system once again.
So let's come on then. I know we said we were going to talk about the mystery Babylon, but I think before let's bring it back to basics. You and I were having a chat before we started recording, and I was saying the reason I stick to a really simple system, and it's become a cliche in that thing where if you're on an aeroplane and it's going down and the oxygen masks pop out, who do you worry about first? You run around making sure the pilot's got his, or the stewardess has got hers, or the person over there in the aisle. You make sure you're wearing, you're all finger pointing at everybody else. Or do you actually take care of your own welfare first? And by that, I don't mean that in a selfish, egotistical way. I mean that the work that I've had to do, Miles, to come from chronic drug addiction, which has been my life, in all honesty, drugs, alcoholism, and that I have to keep consistently doing on a regular basis, which has involved really looking within, studying every single thing that I can, which is why I'm really, really hot on the decode that we can get from the scriptures, because none of this stuff is new. Saving yourself is not new. Very clever men thousands of years ago realized that people like me would come along and we'd struggle because of our specific social chemical makeup, that we'd struggle in life. And they've left behind this wonderful code hidden in allegory in scripture that once you crack it, you're like, I get it now. It's so simple what I've got to do. All the answers are within. I've just got to do this, this, and this on a consistent basis, and my life will go up, and I'll avoid depression, I'll avoid anxiety, I'll avoid getting tied into hatred and bitterness and finger pointing and victim mode and all of this stuff that obviously I never used to understand. And as a result, Miles, I can never leave paradise now. And I'm not saying that. I know people listening, that's a vague concept. To quantify that, I can never now for the rest of my life not wake up and realize this is a gift. It's utterly incredible. I'm so lucky that this manifestation of the divine, which we all are, you said earlier, Miles, we are all one. We're all the universe experiencing itself subconsciously. And that despite all the shenanigans going on, I am not letting them, with their chemtrails and their Babylonian money magic and their voodoo, that's their shit, I'm not letting that affect my time in this set of molecules, experiencing this incredible thing called life. And I am grateful every day to be here. If I was a slave, which, we all are to a certain degree, I'm still grateful to that I'm get to experience this amazing thing. Well, what the heck? Look, that's energy, vibration, frequency. It doesn't actually exist. How amazing is that? My son gave me that mug. That's why I'm showing it off.
Oh, it's very true, Chris.
And here's the thing. I just wondered if we could have a bit of this conversation. I found the secret is it's so simple when it's condensed and someone else tells you it. It took me 35 years of being off my head every day, all the upheaval, Miles, that comes with that lifestyle. I mean, geez, And when we're talking now, I'm just thinking some of the concepts we're talking about, I always put myself down. I think that I don't really, get this or this is but blooming out. I mean, I understand the financial system in essence. That's way more than I did 20 years ago. I totally understand diet and the effects that, things have on your body, which is I'm always telling people. Before you go start talking about central banking, digital currency, digital ID, what Starmer's had for his... Stop that. Work out your pH. This is what's going to put you in paradise and save your life and be a better person for your kids. It's so simple. These cost $2.99 on eBay. Anybody can do it. Most won't because it requires, taking action, and that's a subject for another day. Incidentally, folks, that and the super greens, if you never ever, in my experience, ever want to be ill again, get on the super greens, learn what your body's alkalinity. There's a link below in the description box. I'm a one-man band, folks, so I have to promote myself because I've got bills to pay just like you have, and I can't live for free and do these videos, which take about eight hours of my time a day. So what I'm trying to say, I might make a little commission if you buy some of them. But Miles, getting back on point, we're in an interesting situation. I get the as above, so below, as it's referred to in Mystery Babylon. I get that there's a spiritual battle going on here. It's an energy, vibration, and frequency battle, and that we all have a choice when we wake up in the morning. We can go the side of good, which we've given the clever name of God, or we can go the side of evil, which we've given the clever name of devil. And that can be as simple as me deciding to smile when I go out the front door, or me being miserable, and the pointy head guy with the pointy guy with a pointy tail wins. And that's why I talk about it a lot. Not everybody gets it, Miles. I get a lot of people, oh yeah, but how's that going to take down Keir Starmer? I'm like, well, I'm not saying whether it will or not. But what I'm saying is you're clearly miserable and unhappy and angry enough to be attacking complete strangers on the internet. Perhaps if you started to do a bit of what I did, then you wake up in paradise and you'll see life in a not just a different way, and you'll be happier, but you'll see how this cabal is controlling your every frequency and vibration. And then you can start saying no to stuff. And you said something earlier, Miles, about, doing the hard things. It's worth doing the hard things. And I kind of batted that back a bit, didn't I? And said, yeah, the hard things which become easier, and then realize that you get your life back. Giving up sugar means you've got no inflammation in your body. It's definitely a good thing to do. It's a little bit of a sacrifice, or let's just call it cutting down your sugar. So am I making any sense at all? I'm not really trying to get to a point. I just think there's a lot of people will be listening, Mars, to our chat, and they'll be a bit frustrated because what can they do? They're talking about CBDs and digital, and it is just the bank, central bank, and Federal Reserve, and money and interest. Help! What I don't understand any of it, and I'm saying you don't have to. because it starts with you, and you can jog around the block in the morning, easy. You can make your bed. You can check your alkalinity and make sure you're not feeding the big pharmaceutical scam by never ever getting ill ever again in your life. You can understand scripture, so you never have to be depressed or anxious ever again. You become a much better parent and a much better friend who realizes that life is only about being in service to others. That's it. And if you're not in service to others, you're gonna suffer, because that's just how it works. So, sorry, Miles, I asked you a question and I talked over you, but that was the first part. Is that making a bit of sense?
Yeah, no, I absolutely hear you. I think you're spot on, Chris. It's said that with addition, your ego grows, but with subtraction, your soul grows. I think there's much truth to that. I saw recently someone was saying, "Oh, what we actually need is an involution rather than a revolution." Where people actually just reassess themselves and actually consider what's truly going to make themselves happy. But I think, yes, we do need to start actually making some little sacrifices, and that they don't need to be large, to do what we can to actually reduce our dependence on the system. And so, obviously, we were talking about banking and so on, and when it comes to stable coins and the notion of these tokenized sterling deposits, well, if they want to actually convert our bank deposits into government debt, well, therefore we should actually deprive the banking system of our money. Can you actually use some of your savings to actually possibly buy a little bit of land on which you can grow some vegetables, or keep chickens, or little things that you can actually do? And while you may not be able to do that, can you afford to actually buy a silver coin? So you can actually start to actually make little changes that actually just reduce our overall reliance. And we were talking earlier about just something as simple as going blackberry picking. So it means you're not paying $3.99 for organic blueberries, for like 100 grams of blueberries from the supermarket. Like, just something as simple as that means that you aren't just passively transferring your power and your energy over to these big corporates who don't have our best interests at hand there. But I think we also need a real bit of self-love there as well, for people to actually say, right, am I actually prepared to do this hour and a half commute each morning? Is this really what I want? Or do I actually want to shake things up and look at my life differently? And of course, these are tough steps to make. They're really, really hard things to do. But you can, as I said, just start off with smaller decisions and just see where that leads you. Because you'll find that your skills and your knowledge base then grows in areas that you can then, as you said, offer service to others. It could be that you undertake, I don't know, a carpentry course or something like that, and you actually start to develop skills that you can offer to others, or that you can use to keep animals, or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. On that note, Miles, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to give a shout out on that exact same vein. Friends, if you're getting to that stage of life, middle aged, whatever it might be, and you're thinking that you've missed out, remember what I say: past doesn't exist. You haven't missed out on anything. Your life starts today, as does mine, as does Miles. And if you want to get a bit of a taste of adventure, perhaps those of you that didn't join the military and you think you're missing out on something, I keep telling you you're not, but I know it's hard to get this concept across to another individual. But there you go. I'm taking a team of novices to the Arctic Circle in the first week of March. If you want to come, or you want to get trained up on a pair of skis, trained in Arctic survival, to understand a little bit of what us guys that went up there for our military training do, We'll be staying in this beautiful adventure centre up there, having saunas every night, wonderful food. I'll be with my 2 fellow former Royal Marine Commando training team, who all of us are experts in the outdoors, or certainly certain parts of the outdoors, and we're all kind of life coaches as well. We're going to go up there for a bit of bonding, a bit of fun, lots of smiles, and basically we want to come back feeling much happier, more balanced people. If you're interested in that, send me an email. My email is in the information box on YouTube, or just go to my website. There it is, look, THRALL.com, and we would love to chat to you. The other thing I was going to say is thank you massively to everybody that's chipped in £5 for my upcoming Mount Everest summit. I want to summit Mount Everest to shine a light for struggling veterans, friends, and to make the link between adverse childhood experiences, so childhood abuse basically and trauma, and adult mental health. Because in the veterans community, we're losing a lot of, for the most part, blokes, the occasional female taking their own life as well, but predominantly it's blokes, and nobody is talking about this link and helping people to understand why it is that those of us that served very often can leave the military and then experience this horrific downfall, one that left me homeless and chronically mentally unwell on the streets of Hong Kong. I also want to say to people out there who are struggling, not just veterans, but there is always light at the end of the tunnel. If you're struggling, think of it that God has chosen that you deserve better in your life, and he's put you to the test. And once you learn the simple concepts like the past doesn't exist, so we learn from it, we forgive ourselves, and we move on, that we become grateful for this experience, and we take action, then you can see significant change, and you'll look back at your life in a year's time, certainly 5 years' time, and go, gosh, I can't believe I was so close to taking myself out of the game. Then I came across this guy called Chris on YouTube, and it all started to make sense. That's why I'm doing it, friends, okay? I'm not asking you to give me £1,000, 500, this come through the door. Global disability inclusion. Oh, please give £95 to save site. Yeah, sure, because everyone's just going to give £95 for, I'm not saying that for, I'm just saying, bung us a fiver. There you go. I'll also be supporting a PTSD retreat down in Cornwall. If you don't want to fund me for £5, folks, absolutely not a problem. Guess what? You don't have to message me and tell me. It's like I'm here to save lives and to shine a light for my buddies out there that are where I am. I'm not interested in other people's negativity. And thank you to everyone that has supported me. Miles, where does that leave us then? What I wanted to come on to, you're clearly a knowledgeable, educated guy who, like I like to think I am, has put the time in, because you know that as a human race we deserve better, and that we're getting scammed. We're getting scammed, I believe, by it's a cabal of the merchants who've done this consistently over the years since they learned to take control of the money supply. There you go, folks, Babylonian woe again. And they've got their influence in every single office and position of power globally. They have the Nudge Unit, the Tavistock Institute, the Fabian Society in this country. America's got its equivalent. they've got the CIA, all the Mossad, the MI6, all the intelligence agencies, which on the outside look like they're for the benevolence of the country, but clearly there's a dark thread running through them that links into, let's just say, global events when things go bang, etc., etc., etc. That's in addition to some of the big benevolent institutes like the Tony Blair Institute and Bill Gates, etc., that all profess that they're here to save us. What sorry, what I should get to, Miles, is there's people like, we're all kind of getting aware of all this now. There's people like Graham Moore, who's incredibly knowledgeable on English constitutional law and how we're all being screwed that way, and how we lost our sovereignty as individuals by giving ourselves out to Great Britain instead of being English under English common law, which is based on God's law, so moral law, basically. And is there a way that all of you wonderful people could come together to start an organisation? It would have to be egoless or understand ego. Because when I founded the Global Veterans Alliance, that was a big issue. Everyone was all over the place. Some people didn't even know what spirituality was. They thought it was about like going to church and stuff. Other people totally got it. Some got it to the point where they're like, I don't need to go to London and march. I'm completely zen where I am. And I just feel that now is the time, Miles, that there's enough people now that are awake and aware to all this, that also are starting to get the spiritual element, that we're being controlled by the energy, the vibration and the frequency. And I see people will watch this podcast and they'll be like, Chris, I just don't kind of get what you guys are saying, but I get that there's a problem. I don't know what to do. You got guests on telling me not to pay my me council tax, but then this guy's just gone to prison for not... Help us out here, Miles.
Well, I think we're in a crisis, and of course, we all know that the that means danger and opportunity. Yeah, we can focus on the danger, or we can focus on the opportunity. We of course need to be aware of the dangers that we actually face, and the troubles that they can potentially bring. But we also need to put more time and effort into the opportunities that are actually there, and taking action and getting used to just being a little bit uncomfortable, I think. And that's just so important, because ultimately that is where skill and knowledge development actually occurs, when you feel uncomfortable in doing something. And if we can actually start joining together to actually take common approaches, and we're actually more disciplined about our habits, then we can actually formulate and delay what is actually being rolled out. So whether it's using paper processes for passport applications, etc., we mentioned earlier, whether it's ensuring that you always pay by cash, these are obviously just very little steps that you can actually take. But then you can make sure that you're actually spending money with businesses that you want to support. And that's absolutely key. That's perhaps the most powerful vote we make every single day, and a vote that truly actually matters. So, for instance, we've got a organic grass-fed farm just up the road from us, where we get our beef, and each of the animals is individually named. They're loved, they're cared for, they're out in the fields all year round, and they live a wonderful life. And we're then supporting local farmers who are doing the right thing, who have been debanked by a certain large bank, and they deserve our support because ultimately they are running what is truly a sustainable business operation and not some big corporation where you don't know what is been put into the meat or how it's been contaminated or how it's been undermined.
Do you think there could be? Yeah, I'm picturing this vision in my head where a lot of people get together and form an organization, and maybe it's called, I don't know, Freedom Inc. or whatever. There are a few out there all kind of already, but do you ever think that they could proceed? Because what I see in the quote unquote freedom movement is just people entrenched in ego. And I'm not judging other people. I hold my hand up and say I'm a human being too. It's, you got some people, for example, you've got all the people that follow Tommy Robinson and think that that's the way forward. And they're not necessarily going to get on with this group of people that came to prominence maybe through the medical narrative and marched in London because of, do you see what I mean? There's two, they both realise that there's something wrong in the world, but it's almost like I think people look for false idols to follow. And by false idols, I mean, anytime you project your power outside of you, that's onto a false idol, because the divine light lies within us. So I can worship this mug as much as I like, but I think I'm missing the point that the sovereignty is in here. It's not in something outside of me. So could a sort of grassroots movement get off the ground, Miles?
Well, I think it's a very, very interesting proposition, and I think it's just interesting to consider that march that took place in London just the other day, and how the original organisers almost felt as if their movement had been hijacked by another collective action group. And you're so right about the actual ego and the desire for more attention, more brand prestige, as well as so-called controlled opposition as well, which is deliberately intended to undermine such movements as well. So I think foremostly the change must come from within, but then that principle of love thy neighbor and actually, seeing people's actions rather than words. And I think ultimately we need to move towards a more decentralized system rather than something which is centralized, because I think there's always going to be problems with a centralized element, and there's going to be distrust, there's going to be a desire from that organizing body to want to monopolize things, and the more we can actually decentralize our activities, perhaps that is really the way that we actually truly empower ourselves. And as you said earlier, that does start with the individual and the individual's actions.
Yes. On that note, Miles, I'm going to thank you ever so much. It's been a fascinating chat. You're always welcome. Well, let's get you back on the show and we'll cover the questions that get raised by our friends out there. Stay on the line, Miles, just so I can thank you properly when I hit the record off. But friends, I'm going to put all Miles' links below. I've been showing his socials throughout our chat, etc., etc. Clearly, somebody that's good to have on your side. If you can make sure you're liked and subscribed, friends, that would be absolutely brilliant. And Miles, just thank you again. It's I can tell that there's so much more that I want to ask you. So let's go again. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to, Chris.
Brilliant. And last thing I want to say, a massive thank you, folks, for everyone that supported me on YouTube by becoming a channel member or Patreon or locals or buy me a coffee. For as little as $1.99 a month, you help me to keep this channel going. Thank you. You get VIP tickets to my annual events. So we've got the Christmas Bash coming up. You get your name can get your name in the podcast credits. You're all welcome to join our monthly Zoom chat where we do a bit of kind of life coaching stuff and we talk about why it's important to leave the past behind. We look at global events, and I'll be giving you shout outs in the live stream. Sorry, I've said enough. I'm out of here. Much love, everyone.
Morning, legends. I'm Chris THRALL. I'm a former Royal Marines commando. Upon leaving the forces, ended up chronically mentally unwell, self-medicating, undiagnosed trauma, and homeless on the streets of Hong Kong. It was the toughest battle I ever had to fight, but without the support of the medical community, without self-help groups, I learned the answers to rebuild my life, go on to complete a series of extreme charity challenges to send a vital message out there for other veterans who are struggling. I've run the length of the United Kingdom, run across the Sahara Desert, rode across the Atlantic Ocean. Now I'm taking on my biggest challenge yet, climbing Mount Everest. If you can support me, friends, and continue to shine a light for our struggling veterans and let them know there is life after PTSD, I'll put a link below. Can spare a fiver? That's absolutely fine. And let's give our veterans the respect that they deserve. Much love.
No matter